One of the most highly anticipated regular season non-conference Michigan matchups in quite some time. Have to go back to Washington in 2021 for the last non-league Power 4 game as we welcome in Jack Miller from the Michigan Wolverine Radio Network. Jack, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark.
Before we get into that Texas game, let's wrap up some loose ends from the Fresno State victory. I don't know. It seems like maybe we've seen this script before. In fact, several times the last couple of years with this Michigan program, settling for field goals, close game in the first half before pulling away in the fourth. Is there concern, or is this just what we've seen from the Wolverines?
Probably somewhere in between. To your point, I think they play that style of football. We can go back the last several years and say that there were a lot of wins that they had that weren't necessarily pretty wins. They kind of win in an ugly fashion a lot of times. I think Fresno State's a good football team. You know, they won 9 games last year. You could see on Saturday evening that they have plenty of talent. And there's a lot of new faces for Michigan. Coaches, players trying to find that chemistry and gel together, particularly offensively. They certainly have some things they need to clean up. Going back and watching the film, I didn't think it was as bad as you might have thought at first. Just some little things here and there that I think, you know, it takes time for offenses to develop together. And I think there's a big jump between week 1 and week 2 for teams as the season goes on. Hopefully they iron out some of those mistakes and continue to get better. But they certainly have the pieces. They just got to put it all together. The defense is what we expected: fast, ferocious, plays really, really, a violent style of football, which is fun to watch. And they got a lot of great talent on that side of the ball. So they just got to, keep fixing those things offensively that held them back a little bit in week 1. But I think it's certainly doable.
Certainly one of those new faces offensively is the quarterback, Davis Warren, the starter, former walk-on. Fantastic story, overcoming cancer to play football. A little bit of a surprise. I think most people assumed Alex Orji would be the starter. Is there maybe shades of going back to 2021, the Cade McNamara, J.J. McCarthy quarterback battle, where Warren perhaps has the higher floor but Orji the higher ceiling, and right now they want to go with Warren for that reason?
Yeah, I think it could be. The difference back in that quarterback battle was, Cade McNamara had proven himself, right? That was the tough part. He had been on the field. He had led them to a Big Ten championship. There just was this guy named J.J. McCarthy knocking on the door that we all found out what he was about. I think they're in a tough spot here. I think it's pretty apparent that Orji doesn't have the arm that they need to be that guy, that every down quarterback. And Davis Warren's a game manager. And let's face it, Michigan's style is they're going to own the line of scrimmage. They're going to want to run the ball and play good defense. As long as the quarterback's not making mistakes and can just march the team down the field, usually that's good enough for them to win. Now, we'll see what happens when the likes of Texas come to town and Oregon, and when they have to go to Columbus, if that's enough. That's the question mark. But I don't know what the right answer is. Only the coaches and the players do in Schembechler Hall about what gives them the best chance to win. Certainly, Orji's a talented guy. They probably got to find ways to continue to get him on the field. He runs like a running back, but still can throw. So they're going to have to figure out what the right combination of those two things are. They don't have the luxury they had the last few years of having that ramp-up period where it seems like they were playing Little Sisters of the Poor for the first few weeks. They got Texas coming to town this weekend, so they're going to have their best solution, whatever that might be.
Second ever meeting between Texas and Michigan, the only other meeting coming in the 2005 Rose Bowl. The Longhorn offense has been described as explosive. That's going to test a very good Michigan defense.
Yeah, it is. I mean, Texas is as advertised from what we saw this past weekend. They are big, they're physical, they have tremendous athletes running around the field. They got a guy in quarterback at Quinn Ewers who, has moments of brilliance, right? He can do some things that make him probably one of the better quarterbacks in the country. They are what we thought. They're the number 4 team in the country. It's going to be a tall task for Michigan for that defense. I still do think Michigan's defense is up to the task of holding the Longhorns in check. If they can get the offense going, they'll be right in that game. They can. I could see it going absolutely both ways. But that's the interesting part early in the year is you just don't quite know. There's so many question marks surrounding that Michigan offense. Again, I don't think they're far off. I think the offensive line, has a few things to get better at. They got to figure out how to manage the quarterback situation and get more in rhythm with those wide receivers. But if they do that and they can be steady, they can possess the ball, they can keep that Texas offense off the field, they got a chance on Saturday for sure.
Texas looked good in that Week 1 victory over Colorado State. From the Longhorns' perspective, what's their biggest concern? Is it coming to the Big House on the road, a hostile environment? What are the things Michigan can exploit in this matchup?
Yeah, I think coming to Ann Arbor, coming to the Big House, big new kickoffs there, college game days there, that atmosphere in Ann Arbor is going to be electric. I mean, from what I've heard from people in the athletic department, It's the most coveted game outside of Ohio State that they've had in decades probably. So that is going to be a hostile environment for them. And then that Michigan defensive line, I think is really, really good. We obviously know Kenneth Grant, Mason Graham, but Josiah Stewart, Derek Moore, the two defensive ends, and then the depth that they've had over the last several years. Those guys can rotate in and out and stay fresh. If the defensive line is disrupted like that, it's hard for any offense to get going. And if they can't possess the ball and they keep giving opportunities back to Michigan at home, you just kind of find a way. That's the advantage of playing at home is eventually good things are just bound to happen if you have the ball time and time again. That defensive line for Michigan against the offensive line for Texas, as a big guy myself, I'll be looking forward to that matchup.
As a former offensive lineman, you never wanted to leave the field, but as you touched on, Michigan has done a very good job of rotating guys throughout each and every position. From a former player perspective, now, can you appreciate keeping guys fresh and what that means for the long-term health of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. I talked about it all the time last year on the radio broadcast about the depth that they had. That not only helped them last year for the ability for guys to stay fresh, to stay away from injuries, all that stuff, but you're building a program for years to come because of that. So while there's a lot of guys that are new this year to the starting role to kind of be in the main characters in the act, they played a lot of football last year. So that pays off as time goes on. Certainly as an individual player, you want to play as much as possible, but it also creates a sense of camaraderie amongst the guys that it's not just the starters versus the guys sitting on the bench. When everyone gets their turn and has fun doing it, it builds everyone up from the bottom, and that's how you sustain a good program long term.
One of the neat things about last Saturday was seeing so many of the 2023 team coming back to the Big House, getting one more thank you from the crowd for winning a national title.
Yeah, it was really cool to see those guys. Week one in college football, a lot of the NFL guys come back because obviously their season hasn't started yet. So it was cool, I think, for those guys. Saw Carson Barnhart and Zach Zinner and Chris Jenkins, guys like that who, meant so much to that program over the last couple of years. For them to come back, and it was fun watching them interact with the student section and the team. And you realize once you're out of college, they're just working adults now. They happen to be playing football still, but you'll never get back to college football days.
Number 3, Texas. Number 10, Michigan at noon on Saturday. Thank you so much, Jack Miller. You can listen to him every Saturday on the Michigan Wolverine Radio Network. Thank you, Jack, for lending your insight into the Michigan football program.
Thanks, Mark.